The ring hit the podium. One sharp sound, like a gunshot in a silent room. Priscilla's voice cut through 300 people. "I deserve someone who has already arrived." She smiled, bright, unbothered. Not someone still pretending. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Elijah Carter stood 12 feet away from the woman he was supposed to marry in 3 weeks. His champagne glass was still raised. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on her face, searching for something, a flicker of regret, a moment of hesitation, and finding nothing. Just that smile. Calm and cold as marble, the phones came out. One by one, then all at once. Someone whispered behind him. He heard his name. Then laughter, low, careful, the kind people try to hide but never quite do. Elijah set his glass down, slowly, without a word. He turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps steady, his back straight, his face giving nothing away. One person followed him. Not a friend, not family. Not a single soul from that glittering room full of people who claimed to love him. Just a woman in a white serving uniform quietly setting down her tray at the edge of the room and slipping out the door behind him. Her name was Naomi Reeves. She had worked in his house for 7 years. Nobody at that party knew her name, but she was about to change everything. If you want to know what Naomi saw that night and what she had been carrying in silence for 7 years, stay right here, because this story is going to take you somewhere you did not see coming. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from right now. What city, what state, what country we love, knowing our family is out there. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Atlanta in the summertime does not apologize for itself. The heat sits heavy on the city from the moment the sun comes up, pressing down on glass towers and old brick neighborhoods alike, wrapping itself around everything and everyone with the particular stubbornness of a place that has survived too much to be bothered by discomfort. The city knows what it is. It does not explain itself to anyone. Elijah Carter understood that about Atlanta, because in many ways Atlanta was exactly like him. He was 42 years old, broad-shouldered, with a face that had been carved by years of early mornings and late nights and decisions that kept lesser men awake. He had grown up in the Vine City neighborhood on the southwest side, the kind of neighborhood where the corner store had bars on the windows, and the boys who made it out were talked about for years, held up as proof that escape was possible. Though nobody said that word out loud. Escape. Like where they came from was something to run from rather than something that built them. Elijah had not run, he had built. Carter Construction and Development now had offices in 6 cities. His name was on buildings across Atlanta, apartment complexes, mixed-use developments, a community center on the west side that he had funded entirely out of his own pocket and never once mentioned in an interview. He did not need people to know his good deeds. He just needed them done. He had built all of it from scratch. From nothing. From a 23-year-old with a used truck and a contractor's license, and a mother named Miss Loretta, who believed in him so completely that her belief became a kind of foundation he built everything else on top of. Miss Loretta had passed 2 years ago. Her final weeks had been spent in a private room at Emory University Hospital. The best care, the best doctors, the kind of comfort that a woman who had scraped and sacrificed her whole life had never once expected for herself, but accepted quietly with dignity, with the same grace she had brought to everything. She had passed peacefully, in her sleep, with her son holding her hand. What Elijah did not know, what he had spent 2 years trying to find out, was that the final hospital bill, $42,000, had not been paid by him. He had been prepared to pay it. He had the account set up, the authorization ready. But when his attorney Dwight processed the paperwork, the balance had already been cleared, anonymously. A cashier's check from a name he did not recognize attached to a note that said only, "She deserved every comfort." Elijah had searched for the donor for 2 years. He had hired people to look. He had followed every thread he could find. The trail went cold every time. He still thought about it, more than he told anyone. Naomi Reeves had worked in the Carter household for 7 years. She was 40 years old, quiet in the way that some people are quiet, not from shyness, but from a deep, settled sense of who she was that did not require noise to prove itself. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall, with neat, natural hair she pinned back for work, and kind eyes that noticed everything. She had raised her daughter Brianna alone since Brianna was 3 years old, working long hours and long days, and never once asking anyone for more than what she had earned. She knew where every dish in Elijah's kitchen belonged. She knew that he took his coffee with no sugar, and that he kept a photograph of his mother in the top drawer of his desk, and that he always paused at that drawer when something was troubling him even when he didn't open it. She knew the house the way you only know a place when you have cared for it, faithfully, without being asked to love it, and found that you did anyway. Nobody at the Carter house had ever asked Naomi's opinion about anything, except Elijah, who called her by her name, remembered that Brianna's birthday was in April, and once spent 20 minutes standing in the kitchen doorway, talking to her about a problem he was having with a contractor. Not because he needed her advice, but because she was there and she was steady, and sometimes steady was what a man needed more than answers. Priscilla Wentworth had come into Elijah's life 18 months ago at a charity auction in Buckhead. She was beautiful in the way that certain women are beautiful, deliberately, precisely, as if beauty were a language she had studied and mastered, and now deployed with intention. She came from old Atlanta money, the kind of family whose name was on a hospital wing and a university scholarship fund, the kind of family that smiled warmly at new money, while privately considering it a category separate from their own. She had pursued Elijah with the focused energy of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted. He had been flattered. He had been lonely. He had been, if he was honest with himself later, not paying close enough attention. In the Carter household, Priscilla's presence changed the temperature of every room she entered. The staff felt it immediately. Naomi felt it on the first day. It started small. Priscilla referring to Naomi as the help, when speaking to guests not with malice in her voice, but with a casual, breezy dismissiveness that was somehow worse than malice. Malice at least acknowledged that a person existed. This was something else. This was erasure with a smile. Then it grew. One evening, 3 months before the engagement party, Priscilla hosted a dinner for 8 of her friends at the Carter house. Naomi had spent the entire day preparing the meal: braised short ribs, roasted vegetables, a sweet potato souffle that had taken her 2 hours to get exactly right. She had set the table herself. Every detail was perfect. Priscilla walked into the kitchen 40 minutes before the guests arrived. She lifted the lid of the souffle dish, looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked up the entire dish and set it on the counter away from the stove. "We won't be needing this," she said. Her voice was pleasant. "I told my guests we were doing something lighter. Redo the side dishes." She turned to leave. Then, as if it were an afterthought, she added, "And next time, please don't assume you know what I want for my guests in my home." Naomi stood at the counter for a moment. Her hands were still. Her face was still. She did not say a word. But she heard it. My home. Not his home. Not our home. My home. Elijah was upstairs getting dressed. He had no idea any of this had happened. By the time he came down, the kitchen was clean, the souffle was gone. and Naomi was quietly plating a new set of dishes with the same steady hands she always used. That was the thing about Priscilla Wentworth. She only showed herself when Elijah was not watching, and she had been very, very careful about that. Until the night she made one mistake she did not know she had made because there was someone else in that house who was always watching. Someone small, someone quiet, someone who had her mother's same steady eyes and her mother's same habit of noticing everything. Brianna Reeves was 12 years old, and 3 nights before the engagement party, she came downstairs for a glass of water at midnight. What she heard in that kitchen stopped her cold. The kitchen light was on. That was the first thing Brianna noticed when she came downstairs. The small light above the stove, the one her mother always left on at night, so the house did not feel completely dark, was burning its usual soft yellow. But there was another light too. Brighter, the overhead light. And a voice. Brianna stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She was 12 years old, and she knew the way children know things without being taught, that a voice in a kitchen at midnight meant something different than a voice in a kitchen at noon. She pressed herself against the wall beside the staircase and listened. It was Priscilla. Not the Priscilla who smiled at Elijah across dinner tables or laughed at charity events with her head tilted just so. This was a different voice entirely. Lower, looser. The careful performance had been set aside the way you set aside a coat when you finally get home and no longer need to look like anything for anyone. Baby, I told you, stop worrying. A pause. He has no idea. He trusts me completely. You know how he is too focused on being honorable to imagine anyone around him isn't. Brianna did not move. The Hargrove contract is in his study. 3rd drawer on the left, brown folder, red tab. I already looked. Another pause, longer this time, filled with a low sound that made Brianna's stomach turn a laugh, intimate and conspiratorial. By Monday, you'll have everything you need, and after the wedding it won't matter anyway. I'll have full access to everything. Silence. Then, I love you too. Don't call this number again after tonight. The call ended. Brianna heard the soft click of a phone being set on the counter. Then the sound of the refrigerator opening, the quiet pour of something into a glass. Footsteps moving toward the hallway. Brianna did not breathe. She pressed herself flat against the wall in the darkness. Priscilla walked past her no more than 4 feet away, glass in hand, heading toward the guest suite at the far end of the 1st floor. She did not look back. She did not look sideways. She walked the way people walk when they believe they are completely alone. The moment the guest suite door clicked shut, Brianna exhaled. She stood in the dark hallway for a long time. Her heart was beating very fast. Her bare feet were cold against the floor. She did not go to the kitchen for water. She forgot entirely about water. She turned around and went back upstairs very slowly, very quietly, and sat on the edge of her small bed in the room her mother had set up for her near the back of the house. The room with the yellow curtains that Naomi had hung because Brianna's favorite color was yellow. Brianna sat there in the dark and thought about what she had heard. She was 12. She did not know what a Hargrove contract was. She did not fully understand what full access to everything meant in the context of a marriage. But she understood the voice. She understood the difference between the way a person talks when they are being watched and the way they talk when they believe no one is listening. She understood that what she had just heard was not meant for her ears, and she understood with the particular clarity that children sometimes have about wrong, that what she had heard was very wrong indeed. She reached for the notebook on her bedside table. It was a purple spiral notebook she used for school. She opened to a blank page near the back. She drew what she had heard, the way she always processed things that were too large for words alone. A figure on the phone. A clock on the wall showing midnight. A drawer with a folder inside. The words she remembered most clearly: brown folder, red tab. Monday. He trusts me completely. She drew it all. Then she tore the page out carefully and folded it twice. She did not know yet what to do with it. She fell asleep, holding it in her hand. In the morning, she found her mother in the kitchen before Elijah came downstairs. Naomi was at the counter making breakfast, her back to the door, moving through her morning routine with the quiet efficiency of someone who has done the same thing so many times, it has become its own kind of peace. "Mama," Brianna said. Naomi turned. She read her daughter's face immediately the same way she always could, the same way she had been able to since Brianna was old enough to have expressions worth reading. Something was wrong. Not hurt wrong, not sick wrong, troubled wrong. "Come here," Naomi said quietly. She turned the stove down and moved away from the counter. Brianna crossed the kitchen and handed her the folded piece of paper. Naomi opened it. She looked at the drawing for a long time. Her face did not change, but her hands tightened just slightly at the edges of the paper. "Where did you hear this?" she asked. Her voice was very low. "Last night. I came down for water. She was on the phone. She didn't see me." Naomi looked at the drawing again. Brown folder, red tab, third drawer, Monday. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the front pocket of her apron. "Brianna." She looked at her daughter directly. "You did not hear anything last night. You came downstairs, you got your water, and you went back to bed. Do you understand me?" Brianna frowned. "But Mama, I understand." Naomi's voice was gentle but absolute. "I will handle it. But right now you are going to eat your breakfast and go to school and not say a single word about this to anyone. Can you do that for me?" Brianna studied her mother's face for a moment. Then she nodded. Naomi turned back to the stove. Her shoulders were straight. Her movements were steady. To anyone watching, she looked exactly the same as she always did, calm, quiet, unhurried. But her mind was turning. She knew what the Hargrove contract was. She had seen Elijah working on it for months, a major development deal, the largest single contract Carter Construction had ever pursued. Confidential. Competitive. The kind of deal where one leak to the wrong person could cost everything. She thought about Priscilla's voice. "He trusts me completely." She thought about that brown folder. Third drawer on the left. She went to work that morning with Brianna's drawing in her apron pocket and a question she did not yet know how to answer pressing against her chest like a stone. She was just the maid. Who would believe her? She decided to say nothing. Not yet. She would wait. She would watch. She needed more than a child's drawing and a midnight phone call she had not even heard herself. So she folded her silence around her like armor, and she waited. But she kept the drawing. The night of the engagement party arrived the way Priscilla had designed it, to arrive perfectly. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom on Peachtree Street had been transformed over the course of 3 days by a team of event planners Priscilla had hired and directed with the focused precision of a general preparing for a campaign. White orchids in tall glass vases. Candlelight on every surface. A string quartet in the corner playing softly enough to be elegant and loudly enough to fill any silence that might otherwise become awkward. 300 guests. Atlanta's architects, developers, socialites, philanthropists, the people whose names appeared on buildings and donor walls and newspaper society pages. Priscilla had curated the guest list herself. Every name on it served a purpose. Elijah had looked at the list, once nodded, and trusted her completely. He stood near the entrance in a dark navy suit, greeting guests as they arrived, shaking hands and exchanging the particular kind of warm, confident small talk that successful men learn to perform so naturally. It no longer feels like performance. He looked like a man at ease. He looked like a man who had built something worth celebrating and was allowing himself for one evening to enjoy it. He did not know that 40 feet away near the far edge of the ballroom, where the service corridor met the main floor, his maid was working the event. Naomi moved through the crowd, with a silver tray offering champagne to guests who barely glanced at her. She wore the white serving uniform the catering company required. Her hair was pinned back. Her face was composed. She was invisible in the way that service workers are invisible at events like this, present everywhere, seen by no one. She was watching everything. She had been watching since the moment she arrived and saw Sterling Vaughn walk through the main entrance. She recognized him immediately. Not from having met him, she had never met him, but from the research she had quietly done in the days since she found Brianna's drawing. Sterling Vaughn was the principal of Vaughn Capital Group, a real estate investment firm that had been circling Carter Construction's territory for 2 years, attempting to undercut Elijah's bids on 3 separate city contracts and losing each time. He was 45 years old, silver-haired, expensively dressed, and he walked into Elijah's engagement party with the comfortable ease of a man who had been invited by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Naomi's hands were steady on her tray, but her chest was tight. She watched Sterling cross the room. She watched him find Priscilla near the champagne station. She watched Priscilla's face when she saw him, the brief flash of something unguarded, something warm and private gone in an instant, replaced by the practiced social smile. She watched them exchange a few quiet words. She watched Sterling's hand brush Priscilla's wrist for just a moment, just a second, before they separated and moved in opposite directions, as if they barely knew each other. Nobody else in that room saw it. Naomi saw it. She gripped her tray and kept moving. An hour into the event, something happened that made Naomi's jaw tighten. She was passing near the head table with a fresh tray of champagne when she heard Priscilla's voice, that smooth, carrying voice addressing a small cluster of guests nearby. A city councilwoman, a property developer, a woman whose family had been in Atlanta society for 3 generations. "The food is wonderful, isn't it?" Priscilla was saying, her hand resting lightly on the arm of the councilwoman. "I had it catered by Maison Dubois. I wasn't going to leave something this important to chance." She laughed softly. "Our housekeeper means well, bless her heart. But there are some things you simply cannot trust to someone whose entire culinary education came from a church cookbook." The cluster laughed. Politely. The way people laugh at things that are not quite funny, but that they do not want to be seen not laughing at. Naomi was standing 4 feet away. She heard every word. She set a fresh glass of champagne on the edge of the nearest table and moved away without changing her expression by so much as a single degree. Her face was still. Her steps were even, but something behind her eyes had gone very quiet, the particular quiet that comes not from the absence of feeling, but from the decision to contain it completely. Elijah was on the other side of the room. He had not heard. He never heard. That was the architecture of it. Priscilla's cruelty had been built with exceptional care in exactly the spaces where Elijah was never looking. The evening continued. The string quartet played. The champagne flowed. 300 people ate and laughed and photographed themselves against a backdrop of white orchids and candlelight and the particular glow of being somewhere that felt important. Then Priscilla took the microphone. It happened at 9:47 in the evening. The event MC had just finished a brief welcome toast and was stepping back from the podium when Priscilla touched his arm and took the microphone from his hand with a smile so natural that he stepped aside without question. She waited for the room to settle. "I want to say something," she began. Her voice was warm. She looked across the ballroom at Elijah, and the look on her face was so convincing, so perfectly calibrated, that several women near Naomi pressed their hands to their hearts in anticipation of something beautiful. It was not beautiful. Naomi watched Priscilla's face change in real time, the warmth draining out of it, the way color drains from something held too long in the sun, leaving behind something harder and cooler and entirely different from what it had appeared to be. "I deserve someone who has already arrived," Priscilla said. "Not someone still pretending." The ring came off, hit the podium, that sharp, single sound. 300 phones went up. Elijah did not move. He stood at the center of the room and absorbed it. The words, the ring, the phones, the silence, the low ripple of voices beginning at the edges of the crowd and moving inward. His champagne glass was still raised. His face was stone. Naomi watched him from across the room. Her chest ached in a way she had no name for. Then she saw it. Priscilla stepped away from the podium, moving towards Sterling, who was already waiting near the side exit, with his hand extended and a small, satisfied smile on his face. Her clutch purse swung from her wrist, and as she turned to take Sterling's hand, the purse caught the edge of the podium. A folded document slipped out, fell to the floor, landed near the base of the podium in the shadow where the candlelight did not reach. Priscilla did not notice. She was already walking away. Naomi set down her tray. She crossed the few feet of empty space near the podium. She bent down as if picking up a fallen napkin, a gesture so ordinary, so invisible, that not one person in that ballroom looked twice at her. She straightened up with the document in her hand. She did not open it. Not there. Not yet. She slipped it into the pocket of her serving uniform, picked her tray back up, and looked across the room one more time at Elijah Carter, who was now setting down his champagne glass with the slow, deliberate movement of a man deciding very carefully what to do next. He turned and walked toward the exit. Naomi waited 30 seconds. Then she set her tray down on a service table, removed her catering badge, and followed him out. The Carter house was 22 minutes from the Ritz-Carlton on a normal night. Elijah made it in 15. He did not remember most of the drive. He remembered the parking garage. He remembered the valet handing him his keys. With an expression carefully arranged into blankness, the young man had clearly already seen something on his phone, and Elijah appreciated the professionalism of his silence more than he could have explained. He remembered the highway, the exits, the particular stretch of Cascade Road, where the streetlights got farther apart, and the houses got larger and set back farther from the road, hidden behind trees and iron gates, the architecture of privacy. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a moment. The house was dark, except for the porch light and the small glow from the kitchen window, the light above the stove that was always left on. He stared at that light for a long time. His mother had kept a light on in the kitchen, too. Every night, without fail. She said a dark house felt like a house that had stopped expecting anyone home. He got out of the car. He was still in his navy suit. His tie was loosened but not removed. He unlocked the front door and stepped into the entry hall and stood there in the quiet of his own home and felt for a moment the particular weight of a silence that has gone from comfortable to hollow without your noticing exactly when the change happened. He had loved Priscilla. He believed that. Or he had loved something, the idea of her, the warmth she performed so convincingly, the way she had made him feel for 18 months, like a man who was allowed to stop being alone. He had been careful his whole life, guarded, focused. He had built an empire and furnished it with everything except company. And then she had arrived, and he had let himself believe. He was still standing in the entry hall when he heard the soft sound of the back door opening. He turned. Naomi came through the kitchen doorway, still in her white serving uniform, her catering badge gone, her face carrying the particular expression of someone who has been deciding something the entire drive home and has finally decided. She stopped when she saw him. For just a moment, they looked at each other across the length of the hallway. The billionaire and the maid in the quiet house in the middle of the night. Both of them still in their event clothes. Both of them carrying something the other did not yet know about. "Mr. Carter," Naomi said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not entirely steady. Behind the composure, there was something urgent, something that had been held carefully for too long and was now pressing at the edges of its container. "I need to show you something," she said. "And I need you to hear me." Elijah looked at her for a moment. Something in her face, the seriousness of it, the deliberateness cut through the fog of the evening and landed cleanly. He nodded once. "Come in," he said. They went to the kitchen. Naomi stood at the counter and reached into the pocket of her uniform. She placed the folded document on the kitchen island between them and smoothed it open with both hands. Elijah looked down at it. It was a printed email chain. 2 pages. The header showed a private email address he did not recognize at the top, and below it an address he did know, Sterling Vaughn's corporate account. The chain was dated across the previous 6 weeks. He read the first exchange, then the second. Then he went back to the beginning and read it again, more slowly. His face did not change, but his hands resting flat on the counter on either side of the document went very still. The emails were specific, detailed. Priscilla describing the Hargrove contract in language precise enough that she had clearly read the document herself. Sterling responding with figures, with timing, with instructions. There was a line in the third email from Priscilla that Elijah read 3 times. He keeps the contract in his study. "I can have the physical copy to you before the wedding. After that, it won't matter. I'll have full access to everything, and you'll have what you need to move on the Hargrove bid before he even knows what happened." The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Naomi did not speak. She watched his face and waited. After a long moment, Elijah looked up from the document. His eyes were very dark, very quiet. "There's more," Naomi said. She moved to the bottom of the staircase and called up very softly, "Brianna, baby, come down, please." A pause. Then the sound of small feet on the stairs. Brianna appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas. Her hair loose, her eyes alert in the way of a child who has not actually been asleep. She looked at Elijah, then at her mother. Then she crossed the kitchen to the counter where Naomi had set her purple notebook and retrieved the folded page from where her mother had placed it that morning. She held it out to Elijah with both hands. He took it, unfolded it, looked at the drawing, the figure on the phone, the clock showing midnight, the drawer with the folder inside the words, in a 12-year-old's careful handwriting, brown folder, red tab. Monday. "He trusts me completely." Something moved across Elijah's face. It was there for only a second. Then it was gone, pressed back down beneath the surface by the same discipline that had carried him through every hard thing he had ever faced. He looked at Brianna. "You heard this yourself?" he asked. His voice was gentle, careful, the same voice he used when he did not want to frighten something fragile. Brianna nodded. 3 nights ago. I came down for water. She was in the kitchen. She didn't see me." Elijah held her gaze for a moment. "You did good." he said quietly. Thank you. Brianna looked at her mother. Naomi gave her a small nod. Brianna went back upstairs without another word, her footsteps quiet, steady, unhurried, just like her mother's. Elijah stood at the kitchen island with both documents in front of him. The printed email chain, the child's drawing. Between the two of them, they told a story that was complete enough to be devastating. He did not explode. He did not pace. He did not raise his voice. He went very still in the way that certain men go still when they have decided something, not the stillness of shock, but the stillness of resolution. The stillness of a foundation settling. After a long moment, he looked at Naomi. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. How long have you known? Since before the party, she said. I wasn't sure. I didn't have proof until tonight. He nodded slowly. His jaw was tight. His eyes were distant, moving through something internal she could not see. Then he looked back at her directly. The distance cleared. Something focused and purposeful replaced it. I need to make a phone call, he said. Right now. He reached for his phone. His hands were shaking just slightly. Just enough that Naomi noticed it and said nothing, because some things a person needs to carry alone for the first moment, before they are ready to set them down. She turned to the stove instead. I'll make coffee, she said quietly, and in the particular language of people who have been through hard things and know that small acts of care are sometimes the only honest response to large acts of pain. That was everything. Dwight Holloway had been Elijah Carter's attorney for 11 years. He was 53 years old, methodical, and possessed of the particular calm that belongs to men who have spent decades sitting across tables from people in crisis and learning that panic never once improved an outcome. He had handled Elijah's contracts, his expansions, his disputes, his mother's estate. He had never heard Elijah's voice sound the way it sounded at 10:47 that night. Not broken, not frightened, but stripped of everything except precision. Just the facts, just the sequence, just what he needed done. Dwight listened without interrupting. When Elijah finished, there was a brief silence. Send me photographs of both documents tonight, Dwight said. I'll have a response by 6 in the morning. Elijah sent the photographs. Then he sat in his study with his coffee going cold on the desk beside him and the house quiet around him, and waited for morning. The way you wait for something you know is coming but cannot yet see clearly, with your eyes open and your hands still. By 6:15, Dwight called back. He had spent the night doing what he did best, moving through information, carefully pulling threads, following them to their ends. He had contacted a colleague who specialized in corporate document authentication. He had cross-referenced Sterling Vaughn's business filings. And he had done one more thing, the most important thing, which was to examine the Hargrove contract folder in Elijah's study himself, remotely directing Elijah to check the third drawer on the left. The brown folder with the red tab was still there, untouched. Priscilla had not yet made her move. She was waiting until after the wedding, Dwight said. Full access like she wrote in the email. She planned to hand over the physical document to Vaughn once she had legal standing in this household. A pause. Elijah, if this deal had gone through, the Hargrove contract would have been in Vaughn's hands before your ink was dry on a marriage certificate. He would have used it to undercut your bid, win the contract, and position himself as the dominant developer on the entire South Side corridor. You would have lost the biggest deal of your career, and your wife would have helped him do it. Elijah said nothing for a moment. How do we proceed? He asked. Carefully, Dwight said, and completely. Across the city in Sterling Vaughan's suite at the W Hotel in Midtown, the morning was not going as planned. Sterling had woken up in a good mood. The previous evening had gone exactly as intended. Priscilla had made her exit. Cleanly, the engagement was finished, and within days he expected to have the Hargrove contract in his hands and the South Side corridor within his reach. He ordered room service and checked his phone with the satisfied ease of a man who believes he is several moves ahead of everyone else on the board. Priscilla's message came in at 7:43 in the morning. Something may have fallen out of my bag last night. A document. I can't find it. Sterling sat up straighter. He typed back, "What kind of document?" Her response took 4 minutes. Printed emails. Between us. Sterling set his coffee down. He read the message again. He read it a third time. Then he stood up and began pacing the length of the suite with the rapid, tight energy of a man recalculating everything at once. He did not know who had the document. He did not know what they had done with it. He only knew that somewhere in Atlanta a piece of paper existed that connected him directly to Priscilla Wentworth and to a plan that was not supposed to exist in any written form whatsoever. He called his own attorney before 8 in the morning. The day moved fast after that. What nobody knew, not Sterling, not Priscilla, was that at 9 in the morning, Priscilla came back to the Carter house. She still had a key. Elijah had not yet changed the locks. That was, as it turned out, a mistake he would not have time to correct before she let herself in. Through the front door, walked through the entry hall, and found not Elijah, who was in his study on a call with Dwight, but Naomi, who was moving through the living room with a cleaning cloth, doing what she always did, being exactly where she always was. Priscilla stopped in the middle of the room. The two women looked at each other. Something shifted in Priscilla's face. The social performance did not engage this time. There was no warmth, no breezy dismissiveness, no smile calibrated for an audience. They were alone. And Priscilla, who had spent 18 months looking through Naomi rather than at her, was now looking at her with the focused, assessing attention of someone who has a problem they are trying to locate. "You were working the event last night," Priscilla said. Her voice was even, conversational, like a woman discussing the weather. "Yes," Naomi said, "near the podium. A beat. I was serving the whole room." Priscilla took one step closer. Her eyes did not leave Naomi's face. "I'm going to ask you something directly, and I want a direct answer. Did you pick something up near the podium last night? A document? Folded? It may have fallen?" The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. "I don't know what you're referring to," Naomi said. Her voice was quiet, steady, giving nothing. Something hardened in Priscilla's expression. The conversational tone dropped away entirely. What was left beneath it was colder, sharper, and considerably more honest than anything Priscilla had shown in 18 months. "Let me be clear with you," Priscilla said. Her voice was low now, very controlled. "You have worked in this house for 7 years. You have a daughter. You have a life that depends on the income from this position. I would think very carefully before inserting yourself into something that has nothing to do with you." She paused. "Let that sit. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" Naomi looked at her. She did not look away. She did not step back. She did not blink. The cleaning cloth was still in her hand. Her shoulders were straight. Her feet were planted exactly where they had been when Priscilla walked in. "I understand you perfectly," Naomi said. Her voice was so calm it filled the room. Priscilla waited for more. There was no more. Just those 5 words delivered without trembling, without apology, without a single crack in the surface. For just a moment, the briefest, most fleeting moment, something flickered in Priscilla's eyes that might in a different person have been called uncertainty. Then she collected herself, smoothed the front of her jacket, lifted her chin. "Good," she said, and turned toward the hallway. She was 3 steps from the staircase when Elijah's study door opened. He stepped into the hallway and saw her. He stopped. Priscilla stopped. They stood 10 feet apart in the house that had been his for 15 years, and that she had called her own for 18 months, and the silence between them was so dense and so loaded that Naomi, standing in the living room doorway, felt it like a change in pressure. Elijah's face was unreadable. His eyes moved from Priscilla to Naomi and back again. He took in the tableau, the two of them, the room, the particular quality of a silence that only exists after something has already been said. "Priscilla," he said. His voice was very quiet. "You need to leave." Priscilla opened her mouth, closed it. She looked at him for a long moment, then at Naomi, then back at Elijah. Something in his face told her everything she needed to know about what he already had and what he already knew. Her lips pressed together. She picked up her purse from the entry table. She walked to the front door and opened it and stepped out without another word. The door closed behind her. Naomi stood in the living room doorway with the cleaning cloth still in her hand. Elijah stood in the hallway. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was Dwight. He answered immediately. "Tell me." Dwight's voice on the other end was careful, measured. The voice of a man who has found something he did not expect to find and is choosing his words with the precision of someone who understands their weight. "Elijah," he said, "I need you to sit down." A pause. "I found something while I was running the background verification on Naomi's standard procedure to clear her name from any potential liability before we move forward. I wasn't looking for this. But when I pulled the records, Elijah, you are not going to believe this." Elijah's hand tightened on the phone. "Tell me," he said again. Dwight spoke carefully, the way he always spoke when the information was large enough to require handling. "When I started the background verification on Naomi this morning, I pulled her full financial history. Standard procedure, I needed to confirm she had no connection to Vaughn, no account that could be used to argue she was a willing participant in anything. I was looking for something that would clear her completely." A pause. "I found something that cleared her completely. But that's not what I'm calling about." Elijah waited. "There's a cashier's check in her financial records from 2 years ago. A withdrawal. $42,000. Drawn from her personal savings account and a small credit union account she had been building for years." Dwight's voice was very even. "It was issued to Emory University Hospital, to the billing department, dated 3 days before your mother passed." The study was very quiet. Elijah did not speak. "Shaktichi, I cross-referenced it against the hospital's anonymous donor record that your own investigators had pulled 2 years ago when you were trying to find the source." Dwight continued. "The amounts match exactly. The date matches exactly. The issuing institution matches exactly." "Elijah." A brief silence. "It was Naomi. It has always been Naomi." Elijah sat down. He did not decide to sit down. His legs simply made the decision without consulting him, lowering him into the chair behind his desk with the slow inevitability of a man whose body understands something before his mind has finished processing it. He thought about 2 years ago, the weeks after his mother passed, when he had sat in this same study and gone through the hospital paperwork and found the cleared balance and felt something he could not name, not just gratitude, but a piercing, disorienting sense that someone had seen his mother and valued her, and he did not know who. He had hired investigators. He had followed threads. Every thread went cold. He thought about 7 years ago when Naomi had first come to work in his house. He had been 45 days into a major project, distracted running on 4 hours of sleep and back-to-back meetings. He remembered her first day as a blur, a quiet woman with steady hands, and a daughter who waited for her after school at the kitchen table. He had not asked her questions. He had been too busy to ask anyone questions. He thought about his mother, Miss Loretta, who had spent her life in Vine City, who had known her neighbors and taken groceries to the ones who needed them and sat with the ones who were sick and never once mentioned it. Because that was simply what you did. It was not a story you told. It was just how you lived. She used to bring groceries to my mother when we were struggling. The words landed in his memory before he realized where they were from. A conversation. 2, maybe 3 years ago. Naomi in the kitchen talking about her own mother while she was preparing dinner. A passing comment. The kind of thing you hear and file away without knowing why. She knew my mother, Elijah thought, before I ever knew her name. Elijah. Dwight's voice came through the phone again, gentle. Are you there? I'm here, Elijah said. His voice was very low. There's one more thing. Elijah closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Go ahead. The frame-up, Dwight said. I found it while I was doing the same records check. Priscilla and Vaughn were not operating without a contingency plan. They registered a shell company 3 months ago, a limited liability structure, dormant, no activity. The listed agent is a law firm Vaughn uses for his secondary dealings, but the registered member of record, the name on the formation documents, is Naomi Reeves. The temperature of the room seemed to drop several degrees. They were going to use her, Elijah said. It was not a question. If you had discovered the leak on your own, without the email chain, without the drawing before the wedding, yes. The trail would have led to that shell company, and that company would have led to her name. She would have had no way to explain it, no resources to fight it, no one in her corner. Dwight's voice was careful and measured, but underneath it, if you knew him well enough, you could hear the particular controlled anger of a decent man who has found evidence of something indecent. They chose her because she was the most vulnerable person in that house, someone who could be pointed at and would have no power to point back. Elijah sat with that for a moment. He thought about Priscilla standing in his living room that morning, her voice aimed at Naomi like something precise and deliberate. You have a daughter. You have a life that depends on this position. I would think very carefully before inserting yourself into something that has nothing to do with you. She had not been warning Naomi away from the document. She had been warning her away from her own survival. Elijah stood up from his desk. The stillness that had carried him through the night shifted into something else now, something with direction and weight and forward momentum. He was not still anymore. He was decided. Dwight, he said, I want Priscilla served before she boards that flight. She's booked on a 9:15 flight tomorrow morning to Cancun, Dwight said. I already checked. I'll have the papers ready by tonight. And Vaughn. Vaughn is a more complex situation. What he's done crosses into territory that is not just civil. The use of a shell company to frame a private individual combined with the documented conspiracy to obtain proprietary business information. I want to bring this to someone who handles federal cases. I have a contact. I'll make the call today. Do it, Elijah said. He ended the call, set the phone down on his desk, stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the backyard, the lawn, the old oak tree at the far edge of the property. the late afternoon light coming through the leaves in long gold strips. He thought about Naomi standing in the living room this morning, with Priscilla's threat hanging in the air between them, and not moving, not stepping back, not giving a single inch. 7 years in his house. 7 years of quiet and steadiness and showing up, and never once, not once, asking for anything more than what she had earned. And 2 years ago, $42,000, her entire savings, for a woman who had brought groceries to her mother. Elijah picked up his keys. He drove to Naomi's apartment without calling first. It was a 15-minute drive to the East Point neighborhood, where she rented a small second-floor unit in a brick building on a quiet street. He had known the address for years, emergency contact paperwork standard, but he had never been there. He parked on the street and sat for a moment looking up at the building. The lights were on in her unit. Through the window, he could see the faint flicker of a television and the shadow of movement that meant Brianna was probably at the kitchen table with her homework, and Naomi was probably nearby doing what she always did in the evenings, being present, being steady, making the small, ordinary world work through sheer force of care. He got out of the car, walked up the stairs, knocked. Naomi opened the door. She was in a gray sweatshirt and house slippers, her hair down her face, carrying the particular unguarded quality of someone in their own space who was not expecting company. For just a moment she looked startled. Then the composure settled back into place. "Mr. Carter," she said. "I need to ask you something," he said. His voice was quiet. "Can I come in?" She stepped back from the door. The apartment was small and clean and warm. There were yellow curtains in the kitchen, bright, cheerful, the kind of curtains that belong to a home rather than a house. Brianna was at the kitchen table exactly as he had imagined, textbooks spread around her, pencil in hand. She looked up when he came in, and her eyes went wide for just a moment before she composed herself with the impressive self-possession of a child raised by a woman who never lost hers. "Hey, Mr. Carter," Brianna said carefully. "Hey, Brianna," he said. "Don't let me interrupt." He turned to Naomi. She was watching him with those steady eyes, reading him the same way she had always read him, the same way she had read the household and the people in it for 7 years, with a quiet precision that missed nothing. He looked at her directly. "The hospital," he said. "My mother. The bill that was paid 2 years ago by an anonymous donor." He paused. Let the words sit. "Was it you?" The kitchen was very still. Brianna's pencil stopped moving. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face, not guilt, not fear, but something older and more complicated. The expression of a person who has been carrying something private for a long time and is now watching the door to that private place swing open. "Miss Loretta was good to me," she said finally. Her voice was very quiet. "Long before I worked for you, she used to bring groceries to my mother when we were struggling. She never made a thing of it. She just showed up." She paused. "When she got sick, when I heard how bad it was, I couldn't let her go without comfort. I couldn't let her spend her last weeks worrying about a bill." She looked down briefly, then back up. "I gave what I had." Elijah covered his face with both hands. He stood like that for a moment. Just a moment. Then he lowered his hands, and his eyes were wet, and he did not try to hide it, because some things a man should not hide. "You gave away your savings," he said. "And I gave what I had," she said again, simply, as if that were the only way to say it. From the kitchen table, Brianna watched her mother and this man look at each other across the small living room. She did not fully understand everything that was happening, but she understood the feeling in the room, the particular feeling of something true, being said between two people who are finally ready to hear each other. She went back to her homework quietly and said nothing. Elijah looked at Naomi for a long moment. Then he said, "There is a gala next week, the Atlanta Legacy Foundation annual dinner, the same crowd that was at the Ritz last Saturday. Every person who watched what happened that night." He paused. "I need you to come. Not as my housekeeper, not in a serving uniform." He held her gaze. "As my guest." Naomi blinked. Just once. "Mr. Carter, I owe you something I cannot repay," he said, "but I am going to try, and it starts there." He looked at her steadily. "Will you come?" The yellow curtains moved in the draft from the window. Brianna's pencil was completely still. Naomi looked at this man she had worked for and watched over and quietly protected for 7 years, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been held in place by years of silence and invisibility and being called the help in rooms full of people who never looked at her twice. She straightened her shoulders. "Yes," she said. Elijah nodded. He moved toward the door. He was almost out when Dwight's name lit up his phone screen again. He stopped, answered. "What is it?" Dwight's voice was careful and very precise. "The shell company," he said. "I found something else in the formation documents. Something that connects this to Vaughn's previous dealings. Elijah, this is not the first time he has done this. There is another name, another woman, 4 years ago. The same structure, the same method, a different target." A pause. "I think we have enough to bring this to federal investigators tonight." Elijah stood in Naomi's doorway with the phone pressed to his ear and the yellow curtains moving gently behind him. "Make the call," he said. The week between the engagement party and the Atlanta Legacy Foundation gala moved the way weeks move when something large is in motion beneath the surface, outwardly ordinary, inwardly relentless. Elijah went to his office every morning. He took his meetings, he reviewed his contracts, he answered emails and signed documents and sat in conference rooms and performed the routine of a man whose life was functioning normally. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Kezia, who had worked for him for 3 years, noticed that he was quieter than usual, but said nothing, because she had enough sense to understand that some silences are not invitations. Dwight was not quiet. Dwight was working. The federal contact he had reached out to on Tuesday evening had responded within hours. By Wednesday morning, 2 investigators had reviewed the documents, the printed email chain, the shell company formation. Records the financial trail connecting Sterling Vaughn's secondary dealings to the dormant account registered in Naomi's name. By Thursday afternoon, the investigators had pulled Vaughn's records from the previous case. Dwight had identified a woman named Tessa Moorfield 4 years ago who had lost $160,000 from a personal inheritance account through a nearly identical scheme. The same structure, the same method, the same careful selection of a vulnerable, low-profile individual to carry the liability if the plan unraveled. Tessa Moorfield had spent 2 years trying to prove what had happened to her. She had been dismissed, delayed, redirected. She had no documentation as clean as the email chain Naomi had recovered from a ballroom floor. Now she did. By Friday, the investigators told Dwight they had enough to move. They would wait until the gala, public venues. Dwight's contact explained quietly had certain procedural advantages when it came to serving papers and making approaches that needed witnesses. Elijah agreed without asking for the details. He trusted Dwight. He had always trusted Dwight. Priscilla across the city was having a different kind of week. She had not boarded the flight to Cancun. Something had stopped her at the gate, a feeling, a calculation, the particular instinct of a woman who has been operating on strategy long enough to recognize when a situation has shifted beneath her feet. She had turned around, retrieved her luggage, and gone to Sterling's hotel suite instead. They had spent the week in a careful, tense negotiation of their next move that increasingly resembled two people arguing about how to rearrange furniture in a burning building. Sterling was confident the document was gone, misplaced, thrown away, irrelevant. Priscilla was not confident of anything. She had seen Naomi's face that morning in the Carter house. She had seen the steadiness in it, the refusal to give ground, and she recognized in retrospect what she had been too rattled to name in the moment. That was not the face of someone who had nothing. She tried to tell Sterling this. Sterling told her she was overthinking it. Priscilla, who had never in her life been accused of overthinking anything that actually mattered, did not find this reassuring. She bought a new dress for the gala anyway. A deep burgundy gown, floor-length, the kind of entrance-making garment that announced its wearer before she crossed the threshold. If things were fine, and Sterling kept insisting they were fine, then she would appear at the gala on his arm and begin the work of rehabilitating her social standing with the same focused efficiency she brought to everything. She had crafted her public narrative all week. She was the woman who had made a difficult but honest decision. She had chosen her own future. People respected that. People would come around. She told herself this every morning while getting dressed. She almost believed it. On the evening before the gala, Elijah drove to Naomi's apartment again. This time he called ahead. Naomi opened the door in her regular clothes, Brianna at the kitchen table behind her, the yellow curtains doing their usual gentle work in the draft from the window. Everything looked the same. Everything felt different. He had brought something with him, a garment bag long and flat which he held out to her as he stepped inside. Naomi looked at the bag, then at him. "What is this for tomorrow night?" he said. She took the bag slowly and unzipped it. Inside was a deep emerald green dress, elegant, understated, exactly the kind of thing that did not announce itself, because it did not need to. It was the dress of a woman who belonged in any room she entered. Naomi touched the fabric with 2 fingers. She did not speak for a moment. "Mr. Carter," she started. "Elijah," he said quietly. "After everything, please, just Elijah." She looked up at him. Something in her face shifted, not dramatically, not with the kind of visible emotional collapse that makes for easy storytelling. Just a small private shift, the kind that happens when a wall that has been standing for a very long time is not demolished, but simply gently no longer needed. "I don't know how to do what you're asking me to do," she said honestly. "Walk into a room like that, as a guest. I've spent 7 years being invisible in rooms like that." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why I need you there. Because the people in that room are going to understand something tomorrow night that they have never understood before." He paused. "And I need you standing next to me when they do." Brianna looked up from her homework. She looked at the dress, then at her mother, then at Elijah. Her 12-year-old face was carefully neutral, but her eyes were doing something that looked very much like quiet, private celebration. "It's really pretty, Mama," she said. Naomi looked at her daughter, then back at the dress. She laid it carefully over the back of the sofa and sat down beside it, her hands folded in her lap, and was quiet for a moment. Elijah waited. He had learned over 7 years of sharing a house with her that Naomi's silences were never empty. They were always working. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything," he said. "Why does it matter to you what those people think? You've never cared about that before." She looked at him steadily. "What is this really about?" Elijah sat down across from her, He was quiet for a moment, turning the question over, the way he turned every important question thoroughly without rushing. My whole life, he said slowly. I have walked into rooms where people looked at me and saw the southwest side of Atlanta, saw Vine City, saw new money, no lineage, no pedigree. He paused. I built my way past that. I proved myself on their terms because it was the only language they understood. He looked at his hands briefly, then back at her. But you never tried to prove yourself to any of them. You just lived right. Quietly. Without an audience. And because of that, nobody saw you. His voice was very even. I want them to see you. I want to be the one who makes sure they see you. Because you have been seen by almost no one your entire life, and that is the most unjust thing I can think of. The kitchen was very still. Naomi's eyes were bright. She did not cry. She was not a woman who cried easily, and the tears that pressed at the edges of her eyes she held back with the same steady discipline she brought to everything else. But they were there. They were absolutely there. You knew what she did to me, Naomi said quietly, not accusatory, just naming a truth. In your house, all those times, the souffle, the guests, calling me the help. You didn't know in the moment, but you know now. Dwight told you. He told me, Elijah confirmed. His jaw was tight. All of it. And I am sorry, he said, that it happened in my house, under my roof, while I was too focused on believing what I wanted to believe to pay attention to what was actually in front of me. He held her gaze. I am sorry, Naomi. Nobody spoke for a moment. The silence said everything. Then Naomi nodded once, slowly. The nod of a woman who has been waiting a long time for something and has finally quietly received it. All right, she said. All right, he repeated. I'll come, she said. Tomorrow night, I'll come. Brianna's pencil hit the table with a small, triumphant sound. Both adults looked at her. She picked it up immediately and looked back at her homework with an expression of complete innocence that convinced no one. Elijah stood. He moved toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped and turned back one more time. Naomi, he said, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes after, I need you to know that you are not invisible to me. You have never been invisible to me. She looked at him from across the small, warm room with the yellow curtains and the emerald dress laid over the back of the sofa. I know, she said softly. I think I always knew. He nodded and left. Naomi sat alone in her living room for a long time after the door closed. The dress was beside her, green as still water, waiting. Tomorrow everything was going to change. She could feel it the way you feel weather coming, not with dread, but with the deep animal certainty of a person who has been standing in the open long enough to read the sky. She was ready. The Atlanta Legacy Foundation annual dinner was the kind of event that the city's most powerful people attended, not because they particularly enjoyed each other's company, but because not attending sent a message nobody wanted to send. It was held every year at the Grand Hyatt Ballroom in Buckhead, the same neighborhood, the same crowd, the same careful choreography of influence and visibility that Atlanta's elite had been performing for decades. This year, 320 guests had confirmed attendance. Most of them had also been at the Ritz-Carlton the previous Saturday night. Most of them had the video on their phones. The clip of Priscilla's announcement had circulated widely across the week, not as a viral explosion, but as the kind of quiet, sustained social currency that moved through a particular class of people via text messages and private group chats and discreet lunch conversations. People had opinions. They always did. Some had sided with Priscilla, framing her as a woman who had made a courageous choice, who had refused to pretend. Others had sided with Elijah, framing him as a man who had been publicly humiliated by someone he trusted and handled it with extraordinary dignity. Most had simply watched and waited the way people wait when they sense that a story is not finished yet. They were right. The ballroom filled steadily between 7 and 8 in the evening. The room was beautiful in the way that money reliably makes things beautiful: high ceilings, warm light, round tables draped in ivory linen, a stage at the far end where the evening's program would take place. A jazz trio played near the entrance. Servers moved through the growing crowd with practiced invisibility. Priscilla arrived at 7:45 with Sterling on her arm. She wore the deep burgundy gown. Her hair was perfect. Her posture was perfect. She moved through the room the way she had always moved through rooms like this, with the composed, forward-facing confidence of a woman who believes that presence is itself a kind of argument. Several people greeted her warmly. A few others found reasons to be looking elsewhere when she passed. She noted both categories with the rapid, involuntary social accounting that she had been doing since childhood and kept moving. Sterling was relaxed. He had spent the week assuring her that everything was fine, that the document was gone, that no one had anything. And tonight he carried himself with the ease of a man who had convinced himself completely of his own narrative. He shook hands. He laughed. He ordered scotch and stood near the bar with the proprietary comfort of someone who expected to own considerably more of this city's skyline within the year. They did not notice when Elijah arrived. He came in at 8:15, which was later than his usual habit. He was in a dark charcoal suit, no tie, the kind of deliberately understated presentation that only works when the person wearing it does not need the room's attention to confirm their standing. He greeted a few people near the entrance: the foundation's executive director, a city council member, an architect he had worked with for years. He was unhurried. He was calm. He was not alone. Naomi walked beside him. She wore the emerald green dress. Her hair was down natural, full, framing her face with the kind of beauty that does not announce itself and does not need to. She wore small gold earrings that had been her mother's. Her back was straight. Her chin was level. Her eyes moved through the room with the same quiet attentiveness they always carried. Missing nothing, performing nothing, simply present. She had never been in a room like this as anything other than staff. The difference was not lost on her. She felt it in her chest, not as intimidation, but as something stranger and more complicated. Like walking through a door you had stood outside for years and finding that the room on the other side was just a room full of ordinary people who happened to be wearing expensive things. Brianna had hugged her at the door before she left. Tight both arms, the kind of hug that a 12-year-old gives when words are insufficient. "You look incredible, Mama," she had whispered. Naomi had held her daughter for a moment and breathed her in, and then stepped back and squared her shoulders and walked to the car. She could do this. She was doing this. Across the ballroom, Priscilla saw them. She saw Elijah first. Then she followed his line of movement and saw who was beside him, and for just a moment, the briefest, most unguarded moment, her face did something it almost never did in public. It cracked. Not dramatically, not with any sound. Just a small, involuntary fracture in the surface of the performance there, and gone in under a second. Sterling touched her arm. "Is that—" "Yes," Priscilla said. Her voice was flat. "Why is she—" "I don't know," Priscilla said. But she did know. Some part of her had known since she stood in that living room and looked into Naomi's eyes and found no fear there. She had known then that the quiet woman in the white serving uniform was not going to stay quiet. She had simply underestimated what not staying quiet was going to look like. The evening's program began at 9 o'clock. The foundation's chairwoman spoke first, a brief welcome acknowledgement of major donors, the year's impact summary, then a video about the foundation's community programs, then two shorter speeches from board members. Then, the chairwoman returned to the podium. "Our final speaker tonight needs very little introduction in this room," she said. "He has been a major supporter of this foundation for 8 years. His contributions have funded after-school programs, workforce development initiatives, and 3 community health clinics on Atlanta's west side. Please welcome Elijah Carter." The applause was generous and genuine. Elijah crossed the stage and stood at the podium and looked out at the room for a moment before he spoke. He did not use notes. "I want to tell you a story tonight," he said. "It's about my mother." The room settled immediately. There was something in his voice, a quality of intention, of weight, that told people this was not going to be the usual donor remarks. He talked about Miss Loretta, about Vine City, about what it meant to grow up with a mother who believed in you so completely that her belief became the ground you stood on. He talked about her final weeks, about the hospital room, about sitting beside her bed and watching her rest and feeling for the first time in his life, like all the money and all the buildings and all the contracts he had accumulated could not do the one thing he needed them to do, which was give him more time. The room was very quiet. After she passed, Elijah continued, "I discovered that her final hospital bill had been paid, $42,000, paid in full anonymously 3 days before she died, enough to ensure that her final room was private and her final days were comfortable, and she did not spend one moment of her remaining time worrying about what she would leave behind." He paused. "I spent 2 years trying to find the person who did that. I hired investigators. I followed every thread I could find. The trail went cold every time." He looked out across the room. "Until this week." The silence was absolute. 320 people had stopped breathing in the particular way that people stop breathing when they understand that something real is happening in front of them. "I found out this week," Elijah said, "that the person who paid that bill was someone who had been in my house every day for 7 years. Someone who cleaned my floors and cooked my meals and held my household together with a steadiness and a grace that I did not appreciate nearly enough." He paused. "Someone who gave away her entire life savings money she had spent years building dollar by dollar, working long hours and longer days to ensure that a woman she loved was comfortable at the end of her life." Another pause. Not because she expected anything in return, not because anyone was watching, because it was right, because that is who she is. He looked across the ballroom, directly at Naomi, who was standing near the back of the room at a table by the wall. His eyes found her with the precision of a man who had known exactly where she was standing the entire evening. "Her name is Naomi Reeves," he said. "She has worked in my home for 7 years. She is the most quietly remarkable person I have ever known. And I am asking everyone in this room tonight to see her, really see her, because she has been invisible to too many people for too long." The room turned. 320 pairs of eyes moved toward the back wall, toward a woman in an emerald green dress with her mother's gold earrings and her back straight and her chin level, standing completely still as the entire room found her face. Naomi's eyes filled. She did not blink them back this time. She let them come slow, quiet, the tears of a woman who has been carrying something alone for a very long time and has finally, in front of everyone, been allowed to set it down. The applause started at one table near the front, then another. Then it moved through the room like water, finding its level, spreading and deepening until it filled every corner of the ballroom, warm, sustained, genuine. Nobody was looking at Priscilla. Nobody was looking at Sterling, but Priscilla was looking at the room, at the faces turned away from her, and toward this woman. This woman she had called the help, this woman she had threatened in a quiet living room, this woman whose entire life savings had gone to comfort the mother of the man Priscilla had been systematically betraying. Her champagne glass was in her hand. Her fingers went loose. The glass dropped, not shattered, just fell, hitting the carpeted floor with a soft, anticlimactic sound that nobody heard over the applause. Priscilla did not reach for it. She was very pale. The burgundy dress, so carefully chosen, suddenly seemed to belong to a different evening entirely, an evening that had not gone the way it was supposed to go. Sterling touched her arm again. She did not respond, and then the side door of the ballroom opened. Two men in dark suits entered quietly. They moved along the edge of the room with the purposeful, unhurried efficiency of people who know exactly where they are going and what they are going to do when they get there. They crossed to the table where Sterling was standing. The older of the two men said something quietly into Sterling's ear. Sterling went very still. "Sir?" the man said, just loud enough for the people immediately surrounding them to hear. "We need to ask you to come with us." Sterling looked at Priscilla. His confident ease had evaporated completely. In its place was something raw and unsteady, the expression of a man who has spent years believing his own calculations and has just discovered that one of them was catastrophically wrong. Priscilla took one step back from him, then another. She was not looking at Sterling anymore. She was looking at Naomi across the length of the ballroom, through 320 people who were now murmuring and turning and watching the scene unfold at the back of the room. Naomi looked back at her, not with triumph, not with anger, not with any of the emotions that Priscilla in that moment might have deserved to receive, just with the same quiet, steady, clear-eyed look that she had always had. The look of a woman who had known the truth all along and had simply waited for the room to catch up. Priscilla's knees went. She did not faint with any drama. She simply folded. Slowly, like something with no more structural support, sinking toward the floor as the people nearest her reached out in surprise. Sterling was already being walked toward the side exit. The men in dark suits did not pause. They did not look back. Priscilla sat on the ballroom floor in her burgundy dress with people clustering around her, and her carefully constructed evening collapsed around her like a set that had finally run out of stage. Elijah was already stepping down from the podium. He walked through the crowd, steady, unhurried, moving in one direction only, straight to Naomi. He stopped in front of her. She was still standing. Her eyes were wet, but her face was composed and her back was straight. And she looked in that moment exactly like what she had always been, a woman of extraordinary character, who had simply been waiting for the world to look where it should have been looking all along. Elijah extended his hand. Naomi looked at it for just a moment. Then she took it. Nobody spoke. The silence said everything. The weeks that followed moved differently than the weeks before. Not faster or slower. Just differently. The way light moves differently through a window after someone has finally cleaned the glass. The same light, the same window. But suddenly you can see through it properly, and you wonder how long it had been that cloudy without your noticing. Sterling Vaughn's situation resolved itself with the particular swift ugliness that federal investigations bring to men who have spent years believing themselves untouchable. The charges were significant conspiracy, fraudulent business practices, deliberate financial harm, targeting a private individual. When Tessa Moorfield's case was formally reopened and linked to Sterling's pattern of conduct, the legal exposure multiplied considerably. His attorney advised him to cooperate. He cooperated. Vaughn Capital Group was dissolved within 6 weeks. The South Side corridor development that Sterling had spent 2 years maneuvering to control went to Carter Construction instead, awarded cleanly on merit the way Elijah had always competed. Priscilla's consequences were quieter but no less complete. The civil papers Dwight had served her with were straightforward breach of fiduciary duty toward Elijah's household conspiracy to obtain proprietary business information participation in the shell company scheme intended to frame Naomi. Her attorney negotiated. There were settlements. There were non-disclosure agreements. But Atlanta is a city that runs on reputation, and reputation does not negotiate. The social world that Priscilla had cultivated so carefully over so many years, the charity boards, the gala invitations, the lunch tables at the right restaurants, closed around her absence like water closing over a stone. Her family distanced themselves publicly. Her mother released a brief statement expressing disappointment that made the rounds in exactly the circles where such statements cause the most damage. Priscilla left Atlanta 4 months later. Nobody made a formal announcement. She was simply gone. The way things go when the city has finished with them. Naomi's name was cleared completely and formally. Dwight ensured that every document connecting her name to Sterling's shell company was legally dissolved and expunged. There was a letter official documented placed permanently on file confirming that Naomi Reeves had been the target of a deliberate framing attempt and bore no liability whatsoever for any aspect of the scheme. Dwight had insisted on it. Elijah had insisted on it more. The day the letter was finalized, Elijah drove to Naomi's apartment and handed her a copy in person. She read it at her kitchen table. Brianna sat beside her reading along with the focused attention of a child who understood that this piece of paper mattered enormously, even if she could not name every reason why. When Naomi finished reading, she folded the letter carefully and held it in both hands for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," Elijah said. "That was yours. It was always yours. I just made sure the record reflected it." 2 months after the gala, Elijah stood at a podium for the second time this time, at the Carter Construction annual staff gathering, a smaller and considerably less formal event than the Legacy Foundation dinner. He announced the establishment of the Miss Loretta Carter Community Scholarship Fund, named for his mother, dedicated to supporting young people from Southwest Atlanta in pursuing higher education. The first recipient of the scholarship was announced immediately after. Brianna Reeves, 12 years old, identified by her teachers as one of the most promising students at her middle school, sharp, observant, with a particular gift for seeing things that other people missed. Brianna sat in the front row in a new dress her mother had bought for the occasion. Yellow, her favorite color, and when her name was called, she walked to the front with the same straight-backed composure that anyone who knew her mother would have recognized immediately. And she shook Elijah's hand, and she did not cry because she was 12 years old, and she had decided that today was a day for being proud rather than emotional, and she was absolutely right. Naomi, sitting in the second row, cried enough for both of them. 3 months later, she began her new role at Carter Construction Director of Community Partnerships, responsible for overseeing the company's relationships with the neighborhoods where it built and the organizations that served those neighborhoods. It was work that required exactly what she had always had in abundance: steadiness, attentiveness, the ability to walk into a room and understand what people actually needed rather than what they said they needed. She was extraordinary at it. On a quiet Saturday morning in early autumn, Naomi drove to Westview Cemetery on the southwest side of the city. She had been before, not often, but deliberately, on the occasions when she felt the pull of a conversation that could only be had in one particular place. She parked and walked the familiar path to the headstone she was looking for. She had brought flowers, yellow chrysanthemums, bright and unhurried, the kind of flowers that do not apologize for being cheerful. She set them down at the base of the stone, smoothed the grass with one hand, and sat there for a while in the morning, quiet, the way you sit with someone you have not seen in a long time but have never stopped talking to. Loretta May Carter, beloved mother. She lived with her whole heart. He found out, Naomi said softly. I know you probably already knew that. You probably arranged it somehow. A small smile. He's doing well. He's doing really well. She paused. Brianna is going to be something. I don't know exactly what yet, but it's going to be something worth watching. Another pause. I'm okay too. I think I'm more than okay. I think I'm... She stopped, looked for the right word, found it. Scene. The autumn leaves moved overhead. The morning was still and gold and unhurried. Thank you, Naomi whispered, for teaching him how to look. She sat a while longer, then she stood, smoothed her jacket, and walked back to her car through the quiet Saturday morning with the steady, unhurried steps of a woman who knows exactly where she belongs. There is a kind of person this world consistently overlooks. The quiet ones, the humble ones, the ones who show up every day without applause, who give from their own diminished portions, without announcing it, who absorb cruelty with dignity and repay betrayal with loyalty, and keep doing what is right even when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. The world calls them invisible, but invisibility is not the same as insignificance. And the truth that this story insists on, is that the people we overlook are very often the ones carrying the most love, the ones whose goodness runs the deepest, the ones whom God placed in our lives, not as background, but as foundation. Treat every person with dignity, not because they might be wealthy or powerful or connected, but because they are a person, because their life has weight. Because your kindness today, offered quietly, without an audience, without expectation, may be the very thing that comes back one day to rescue you when you need it most. You never know whose apron pocket holds the truth. You never know whose savings bought someone you love one more comfortable day. You never know who has been quietly faithful to you in ways you have not yet had the grace to see. See the people around you. Really see them, before life has to teach you how. If this story moved you, if Naomi's quiet strength made you feel something, if Brianna's drawing made you smile, if justice finally arriving in that ballroom made you exhale, then let us know in the comments right now. Tell us which moment hit you the hardest. Tell us which character you will be thinking about tomorrow. And tell us where you are watching from. Drop your city, your state, your country. We read every single one, and we love knowing that this family stretches as far as it does. If you are not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Hit that button. Turn on the notification bell. We are here every week with stories that remind us who we are and what we owe each other. We will see you in the next one.